Hey, Kendrick, how are you?
Welcome to the Brave Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Jena Rodriguez. Entrepreneurs are leading the way and creating a whole new level of possibility. Each week, listen in to hear how brilliant entrepreneurs share their brave secrets. Entrepreneurship is not the easy way. It is the brave way. Now let's get our brave on.
Hey, Kendrick, how are you? Where are you is the first question.
Hey, I am in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm really excited. I loved your energy. I invited you to be here. I saw you on, another, it was like a one-day event that you were speaking at, and I was like, I have got to know this girl.
I love it. Thank you so much. Kindred spirits for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate you being here and just being willing to be so open with our audience and such. So first and foremost, kind of give people an idea. They can read it in the show notes, but what is the work in the world that you do first and foremost?
I created a sales process called Authentic Selling, and it has become the #1 sales system online for modern businesses. Modern businesses being businesses that have a web or an online presence. We work with Fortune 500 companies, and we work up with the small startup, I have a dream kind of entrepreneurs that quit everything and go after it all.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And you are, as you were telling your story when I first, ran across you it's been a journey and you've come a long way. And so I'd love to dive into kind of your origin story per se. And so you haven't always been doing this, I'm gathering. So yeah, how'd you get here? What was that, kind of turning point in your life?
Yeah, so I was a top performing sales rep for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I had my daughter, and that changes everything in your world.
Yes,
everything. And one night I was rocking her to sleep, and she was 2 years old. And I remember I tell her sort of the same mantra every night, even still today. You can be anything you want to in this world, but you have to believe. You have to believe. And as I'm rocking this daughter of mine to sleep, I'm thinking, she doesn't understand what I'm saying, but one day she will. Right. And one day she's going to say to me, Mama, did you want to sell drugs for a living? I was pharmaceutical sales rep. So let me clarify real quick. Did you want to sell drugs, the legal kinds, for a living? Was that your dream? And I was going to have to look her in the eyes and say, no, it wasn't. And then all of that, you believe and you can be anything, was just sort of hogwash at that point, like it was just lip service. And so, I can still feel the feeling. I put her down in her crib or bed or whatever she was in it to, and I kind of burst into our doors in our bedroom, and I said to my husband, I am living a lie. And he's pretty used to me being dramatic. He didn't even look up from the television. And I said, listen to me.
Yeah,
I have got to be a better role model for this child, and I'm going to go on a mission to figure out what it is. What is it that I need to do? And that started this whole thing.
Yeah. How long ago was that, out of curiosity?
9 years.
9 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And interesting. I started being an entrepreneur when my youngest was 2, right? And it's
there you go, right?
Gotta live the dream, and step out there and so it's interesting. I think it's brave in itself for us to admit that, right? I think there's a brave inside of noticing, owning, taking ownership, even if it was just a dramatic moment that says, I'm living a lie. I'm not aligned with where I'm meant to be, where I'm wanting to go. And I just told my daughter what my own advice, and and it's like, oh gosh, now I have to take it. So what occurred after that? How did you actually step into that and not just suck it back in and say, well, that was a crazy evening,
Well, it was just a straight line to success. After that, everything just fell into place.
Straight up.
Yeah, it was just like, okay. And I went to bed that night, and the next day I had $1 million business. No.
Amen.
Yeah, man, if I could teach that, I would be like a gazillionaire, right?
I know, right? Bottle that up.
Yeah, exactly. So I took a lot of wrong turns, or maybe they weren't wrong turns. I don't know. I immediately after that. So this was, let me just say, this was a moment I couldn't ignore.
Yeah.
Like there are those moments that you can chalk up to, okay, that was just a crazy night, you know. But this was something that I felt, and y'all know what I'm talking about. Like I felt in every cell in my body. It was in my soul. Like I had to figure out what it was. So I had been in the corporate world, was still in the corporate world, knew nothing about life coaching, nothing about any of that. But I hired an executive career coach that I found online. And she had me read a Martha Beck book, Follow or Find Your Own North Star. And I was like, I found it. This is what I want to do. I want to teach people to find their passion. So I enrolled in Martha Beck Life Coaching School and went through that. It was a fantastic experience, but I am a terrible life coach. Okay. I don't like to lead people to the answer. I like to say, no, you're doing the wrong thing. This is the answer, right? I came from the world of quota, exceed quota. And so leading you there and letting you figure it out, I'm just not good at that.
Very good.
So I was not a good life coach. And it did not bring me fulfillment. And so kind of through a bunch of wrong turns, I ended up helping out a friend. And she said, oh, my dear, this is what you need to be doing. And I said, I have no clue what I just did. What is it that I did? And she said, you taught me how to sell. Yeah. And I was like, isn't that interesting? Because that's what I've been doing my whole life. And so I sat down with a pen and a piece of paper and created authentic selling and you know, just sort of right foot, left foot, breathe, right foot, left foot, breathe.
Yeah, it is a dance for sure.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think what is powerful about that, even, you know, I know it's like once we live through it, once we like get through the ugly and get through the experience of the moment of finding, it's like number one, admitting this is not my life and this is not what I'm meant to do. And then moving forward, which I think is brave in itself, is like, I always call it finding the spark of inspiration, like hearing the voice, hearing the moment, and then making a new decision and then committing to that new decision is one of the hardest things to do. And yet even it's not, but it doesn't have to look what we think it's going to look like. And so you still committed to the decision called, I've got to change something about what I'm doing. And finding yourself in, you know, experiences. I always say, like, life shows us contrast. Life shows us what we try something and then we're like, oh, I don't like that. It's kind of like trying 31 flavors of ice cream. Exactly. There are ones that I'm not going to like, but until I try it, until I put myself out there, until I take that next step, then I don't know that contrast. I don't know the preferences that I have. And so, you know, and because there's a lot of people I speak to, I mean, I've worked with many, clearly, and it's like they make themselves shameful and wrong for choosing a motion forward. And I was like, no, celebrate the motion forward. Because now you know what you don't want. Now
exactly.
You know what else to do.
I feel like, you know, in selling, step number one of selling anything is prospecting, right? Going out and letting people know you exist. I feel like we need to prospect in life. I feel like, you know, you choose a path. My path was I went to college, I got a degree, and I came out and I was like, what the frick do I want to do? You know, and everybody's saying you got to get a job and you got to do this and you got to do this. And I'm like, but I've got my whole life ahead of me. I want to try this and I want to try this. And I feel like we need to prospect in our life to find out what lights you up at 24 and at 34 and 44, because they change.
That's right.
You know, they change. What lights me up today would not have been the same stuff that lit me up. And I feel like we get so in such a routine that myself included, I'm not preaching, I forget to do that.
Yeah. Right. And and this is our own self reminder as well as a reminder for everybody else that, and you said it, I feel like we go through what I call identity pivots.
Yes.
Kind of like moving.
That's so much better said than what I said. Yes. Let's use that. Because that
I have a word for everything. No, I'm just kidding.
I love it.
But yeah, like 24, you're going to have a different identity and then you'll pivot again at 34, right? I also call it jumping from fishbowl to fishbowl.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you need to give that woman permission to find out what fills her soul up at this stage in her life.
Yeah.
And I think that gets more challenging, and requires a little bit more courage the older you get.
Yeah.
You know, like as you have children and you get in the routine and you don't make time for yourself, I feel like, you know, giving yourself permission to prospect and play and figure out what lights you up is a really courageous thing to do.
Yeah, it is courageous. Absolutely. And so we were talking a little bit before we hit record,
Yeah.
and you shared with me one of the hardest and maybe the leap of faith that you had. You invested like $100,000, and I don't know if you've already shared that story, but speak to us about some of the things that when we know there's something new and then we go out on a big limb, and you know, and just how that turned out for you.
Sure. So when you know, you can't tell your 2-year-old. It's interesting. You started your business when your child was 2. Mine was 2
You
as well.
too?
Yeah. So you can't
Interesting.
tell your 2-year-old you can be anything you want to be in this world, but you have to believe and not believe, right? And
Right.
so I didn't know this. I didn't know how. I didn't know the how, but I
Sure.
believed. I have this. One of my friends says you have this just uncanny ability to believe anything, and I do. I have great belief in people and in myself. It's one of my superpowers. Anyway, off on
That's
a
awesome.
tangent. So I believed. I remember saying to my husband, I don't know how, but this business is going to make it. Well, the problem was I had been selling for over a decade. I didn't know how to market. I mean, all the marketing was done for me. I didn't
Right.
know how to create products. I didn't know how to do all the things other than sell. Nothing. And so, and I'm a learner, so I invested $100,000 in learning. I have like an advanced degree in running an online business,
Yeah.
and
For sure.
I cashed out my 401k, and my husband was like, "You can't do that." I'm like, "But I believe." It was almost like
Mhm.
reckless belief, and I can remember
Or
sitting
radical.
a radical, yeah, sitting
I
at a
like that.
restaurant with my husband, and just bursting into tears and saying it was a year later and saying, I don't know if I believe anymore.
Mm. Wow.
Like he was like, we have got to have you make some money. Like you have blown through our savings. You have, you know, we were living in Chicago at the time. He's like, we've got to
Mhm.
have some income. And so I gave myself permission to break down, and it was awful.
Yeah.
Um, and then I decided that, okay, and this wasn't just an automatic decision, I'll go back to work. I'm good at
Mhm.
selling. I'll go back to work, and I'm going to believe that this is a step to get me where I want to go.
Right.
So had a choice there, right? You can
Yeah.
believe you're giving up on everything and going back to work, or you can believe that this is a step that a bridge to get you where you want to go financially.
Sure.
And so I started interviewing for jobs, and I remember riding down to an interview in downtown Chicago. We were in the suburbs, and I wanted to vomit. I mean, I
Mhm.
felt like such a failure, you know, because you
Yeah.
come out and you say, I quit my job and I'm going to make gazillions of dollars. I'm going to run my own business. And now I'm right back to,
Yeah.
you know, to
Tuck the
interviewing for
tail.
jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I interviewed for jobs, got a job offer there on the spot. And then something really unusual happened. The manager called me back the next day and said, our company's just gone on a hiring freeze.
Wow.
And so you will be the first official offer that we make, even though they had already made it. You'll be the first person we hire when the hiring freeze goes off or goes away. If you don't have a job by then, give us 3 months.
Wow.
And in that 3 months, everything kind of fell into place. I had my first webinar, my first $10,000 month. I mean, it just sort of went like this from there.
Interesting. You know, and I think for me, what I see in that is we get tested. You know, it's like, what is our resilience? What is our bounce back factor? And I think the power of it is that you got willing. You got willing to go get the job. You even took the actions to prove that willingness. And then it's almost like God intervened and said,
It
no, you
was.
were right the first time. This really isn't
Yeah.
where you're meant to go. And we're going to put circumstances called a hiring freeze. And you're going to have to go back and do what you don't know and figure
Yeah.
it out. Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know we're new to each other. My story is I was in corporate America as a controller, and, you know, it's like numbers came easy, but I was like bored out of my mind. And and I'm a creative. That wasn't a creative job. It was very black and white numbers, right? And I'm good at it, but that doesn't mean it lights you up. And so I jumped out and bought a storefront, and I was like gung ho. I'm like SBA loans, and I was doing it all, and like, go for it, right? And 1 year later, I was $700,000 in debt and had to file bankruptcy because it wasn't working. Wasn't happening.
Yeah.
But I saw my resilience and bounce back, because I woke up the next day going, all right, how do we keep moving? But I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. I knew that was clear for me, and the willingness. What I did in the interim is I actually kind of hybrid worked for someone else, which meant I just went and got some outsourcing controller positions, because I knew I could quickly get some contract work in that space to pay the bills. And so I think what this does for me, and hopefully for people watching, is, our stories and our circumstances are sometimes similar yet very different. And I think how you respond to them and how you navigate it, and the willingness is what releases the failure. It releases the hook. I call it the attachment, and then the detachment process. It's like being able to detach from the attachments we have, whether it's the stories or I have to do it this way or whatever, to allow for those miracles to show up and those opportunities to actually come to fruition. And so I just really appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like, like people do feel like, oh, it should be just a straight line. I'm like, it's not a straight line ever.
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah. And I think also, I think that a common misconception I had was, okay, well, once you get there, wherever there is, right, that you won't, maybe I didn't have quite this misconception, but that there won't be times that test you just as equally, or just as, you won't have to be quite as resilient because, you've made X amount of dollars or you've whatever.
Right.
But my experience has been, the tests look different, but the resilience is a skill, and bravery and courage is a skill that I've needed year after year, day after day to run this business. I don't think businesses survive without it, not for the long haul.
100%. Hence the podcast.
Hence
why we're here, because 100%. I think it is a personal development course that you pay for with your sweat and tears and actions, and get up and keep moving, and and own your stuff, own your failures, own the stories that you make, and all of it. Like, it is the ultimate test. And so I'm assuming was that 9 years ago, that like the hiring freeze.
Yeah.
And so what's in these last 9 years, clearly you've created success around it, whatever the definition of success is. But what was like the next pivotal moment, like the next powerful, brave moment inside of growing the business and, going from where you were and to where you are now?
I don't know about the next, but I'll tell you the hardest. The hardest.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been a long time in 9 years, so there's been a lot. But the hardest, the
one that shows up for you.
The one that, and it's pretty recent. So this year, we have a university called Authentic Selling University,
right? And
it's been around for 6-7 years, something like that. And it's well, actually, formerly it was sales school. So it was around the sales school, and we rebranded it as Authentic Selling University. And we were scheduled to have our first 7-figure launch. So we have hit 7 figures in business over the course of a year multiple times, but we've never had one launch that was 7 figures.
Right.
Scheduled to have our first 7-figure launch. Been planning it for about 8 months. 154 emails written, 2 photo shoots, a copywriter, social media, all the things. And on day 3 of the pre-launch, the pandemic happened. And of course, the pandemic isn't about me, but in the span of 7 days, every email had to be rewritten. Every social media post had to be rewritten. The sales page had to be rewritten. And we had to decide, do we launch or do we not? Yeah. Right? Is it insensitive to launch? What should we do? And I have never I don't recall feeling so tested as a human being, but I mean, like it's sort of similar to when I started, because not only did we have to have the stamina, I rewrote everything. So I said, this is not something somebody else can come in and do. This is not like, this is, it needs to be my voice. And so we barely slept. We came to the decision that it wasn't about us, but we were going to continue with our launch, because we felt like not continuing in our little corner of the woods created panic, and we didn't want to create panic. And we felt like the skill set of learning to sell would help people make money, and now they needed to make money more than ever. But it's a weird thing to get on social media in the middle of pandemic and talk about launching a course and do it with authenticity and not sound sleazy and not sound slimy. And, you know, why the heck are you launching? Well, thanks for asking. Let me tell you.
Right.
And so we learned so much. We did not have $1 million launch. And I am so thankful for the experience because of the resilience of my team, because of what we learned. I'd say I'm one of very few people who has actually launched in a pandemic. So I'm thankful for that. And, you know, it was, I mean, I never will forget when my COO called and she said, we've got to make a decision. Do we continue? And I said, heck, I don't know. What's the right thing to do? I don't know. And you don't want to make a wrong move. You know, you don't want to do something that's insensitive or something that comes across the wrong way. So I felt like that took a lot of courage from our entire team to show up the way they did.
Yeah. You know, and I think clearly we're still in it per se.
Yes.
We're still in it as we record this. We're a couple months later, and I can remember, I mean, it's about 3 months later, and even 3 months ago, it's kind of like, where are we going to be in 3 months? But here we are, right? And we're still alive, and we're still breathing, and we're still here. And, you know, and I think, you know, of all my life experiences of just all of the adversity and hardships and ups and downs. And it's like, I still find me at the end of the day. I still find me. I'm still here. And I think we get so distracted by everything outside of us, and what it means, and how do we manage other people's feelings, and how do we manage their reactions, and which is like an impossible feat, really.
Of course it is.
And for you, what's interesting, what I just heard was like, what's your title of your your business and company?
Authentic selling.
Authentic, right? And so it's almost like, well, what does that mean? You know, and what I heard in that is that you stayed true. Now, you had to pause long enough to hear the truth. You had to pause long because you're like, I don't have a clue. And I'm curious if you have practices around that. I have a lot of what's it called? Just kind of personal practices in order to hear the truth and hear the voice and get out of my ego and get out of my head. And for you to authentically align first with you, then you could lead your team, then you could lead your community, et cetera. So do you have any advice around that, or what you went through in that space?
Yeah, the first thing is put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
I mean, in that moment when Shelly called, I was in fight or flight, and I was like, I have no idea. Like, my husband just told me he's going to be working from home. You know, people, I mean, like, it was right in the middle of all that when people were being sent home, when we had closed our office and came home. My daughter was out of school. Y'all know, y'all went through it too.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. So I need okay, I hear you. We have to make a decision. Don't send anything else. So be willing to pause, right? Put your own oxygen mask on first and be willing to pause. I mean, we're in the middle of a launch that we spent a lot of money on. Just stop all communication until I'm clear.
Yeah.
And I took a long hot bath. And it's super quiet, obviously, in the bathtub, and I meditated, and I still didn't have an answer.
That's right.
And so I started calling people that I respect, and I said, will you talk this out with me? Other CEOs. And I got varying opinions, by the way. Absolutely do not. You absolutely should. But it helped me to hear them talk it out.
Yeah.
And by hearing them talk it out and feeling my feelings, right? When somebody said you absolutely should not, I'm like, ooh, I have a pretty strong gut reaction to that I disagree. So why do you disagree? And so it's almost like selling yourself on the belief, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so within 24
Ironically.
hours, I was fortunate. Within 24 hours, I called a team meeting and said, "Here's what we're going to do. All expectation is out the window. We're gonna tell people to put their own oxygen mask on first. We're gonna tell people we're gonna be vulnerable. We're
Yeah.
gonna say we don't know. We're gonna be willing to learn. We're gonna be willing to change, and we'll see. Our goal here is to show up for our people,
Yeah.
and we did do that. I am so proud of the way that we did that. And
Yeah.
then I said, now get me every social media post and every email in the sales page because I gotta rewrite it. And we rewrote what took 8 months. I rewrote it in less than 24 hours.
Wow. 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 Thank you, because that, I think, is what is really what people don't hear, is how do we arrive at our authenticity? How do we arrive at our decisions? And so we're even more like, I'm glad to say, is that it's our higher self is in our body, it's in our feelings, in our gut, and it's not in our head. And I love that that's a resource that you pull on, and I do too. I have very specific people that I know that can see me, and see my intention and see my heart and know how to let me soundboard what I'm and hear their opinions, all of that. Sometimes I have to be quiet and on my own, and if I can't quite get to the answer, then I have to bounce it somewhere, like, and explore the feeling. Yes. I mean, I think that was huge for people to get, is that instead of reacting, right, like allowing the externals, allowing the circumstances, we're moving, we're shaking, we're, coming home, we're shutting things down, we're, managing our children and how they're reacting, it's like all of that is happening. It's not that it's not there. However, we have to come back to our center. Where is belief come from? It comes from within. It comes from the gut. It comes from I have a hashtag called gut and faith.
Yeah.
Right. So you listen to your gut and follow with faith. And I would gather that that's what you did and do. And so then at least you're showing up as authentically you. Did you get any backlash? Did you get any?
Yeah, of course we did. Yeah, absolutely. And that was, I think that's the other thing. You have to be willing, especially when you run businesses like we do, where you are sort of the brand. You have to be willing to hear people's opinions and not take them personally, and also have good boundaries. So I will not be a punching bag. That's not what I signed up for. But I am happy to hear your opinion. I am happy, and we actually had someone in Italy who originally said, I think that this is maybe one of the most insensitive things I've ever seen for you to be selling. And we had a conversation on email, and she came back and said, I get it. I understand why you're doing this. Thank you. So, and not everybody did. Not everybody got it. But
Right.
I think being willing to have the conversations and say, yeah, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. I may not agree with you, but I understand.
Right. And I think there's such a powerful opportunity for people. And then, not only do we have pandemic, we have a whole nother challenge in our world now, in the US especially. And so it's the difference between, I understand you is not, I agree with you. I love you. I love you is not, I agree with you. Yeah. However, where does, it's like in the middle of that is respect and listening and understanding and taking ownership of our capacity to allow that in and not take it personal. And if it is personal, then go look at why it's personal inside of you, not go, blame them for creating something personal. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I always say that, people don't hurt me. I feel hurt. Right? People don't hurt me. I feel hurt. And then I get to go heal the wound. And so I just, look, brave is this, I mean, you are an epitome of brave, and this conversation is what I'm like, so glad we're bringing to light, because there is, I too just went through, last week was one of the hardest weeks out of all of the last 3 months with everything, is because I could not find my words. Like you were like, take a bath. I was like, it took me a good 7 days. I could not find my words. And it was like the words were there in my gut and heart, but my ego kept pulling me out of it. My mind kept pulling me out. And what I got to see in that process about me was that all of the I would call it some of the ugliness of the state of the world, and which, brings sadness to me for sure, is that it triggered something in me that was a previous hurt. And I would never, it's almost like, thank you. I wouldn't have seen it. And what I saw is I have dealt with a lot of verbal abuse in my life. And I was consuming, not even directed at me, like not even like directly at me, but I was like, this is verbal abuse. And so it triggers. It's like we all have triggers, and it's like, it's not about even the situation sometimes, or it's not about them or the circumstance. Yeah. And so for you to take such powerful ownership of, yes, I have a decision to make. I'm a leader. I'm a CEO of a company, and there are people that lean on me, and, you've got a team, and you've got a family, and you've got clients, and you've got people to just respond to. And I just love that you responded versus reacted. You listened to what's true for you and aligned with what's true for you, and then responded from there. And people are going to agree or disagree. Always, like 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And that goes back to good old fashioned sales training, right?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. If somebody says I can't afford it, the last thing you need to do is argue with them and try to convince them that they can. Okay. The old Southern saying, you get more flies with honey than you do vinegar. I don't know why you want flies, but it's the truth. Like it's empathy. Having empathy is one of the greatest ways one of the greatest tools as humans that we have to understand people, to have empathy. Again, that doesn't mean that you agree. And it's one of the greatest tools we have when running a business. It's a sales tool that we use inside of authentic selling to say, I understand, not you're wrong, not use guilt, but how about we just have some compassion and understand people, and then move the conversation from there? Because you're not going to get anybody on your side. No one, by saying you are wrong. Even if they're wrong, even if they say the sky's 100%. Purple and it's not purple. You need to understand that when they look at the sky, they see purple, right? Yeah. And then let's have a conversation. But by telling someone you're wrong and by being ugly to people, I learned a long time. It's not the business that I want to run. It's not the business I will run. Yeah. If it's to the point where we have to be ugly to people, then I'm out.
Yeah. 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 And I love that you brought up boundaries. Give me, if you would, and for me and others, what's an example for you? How do you set a boundary when it's just not aligned with you? Like whether someone's saying things that are just not, that are mean or whatever, or just in general, like how do you set those boundaries? What does that look like for you?
We get our fair share of that. Certainly there are times when it's worse than others, but one of the things that I don't always respond. If it is hate, if it's ignorance, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to engage in that. Yeah. Like the woman from Italy that I referenced, she legitimately, although she disagreed with me and she said it was insensitive, in that instance, I wanted to respond. So I think it depends on and sometimes it's hard not to respond. I'm human, right? So, you can get triggered. So I try to take a deep breath, walk away, and think, do I even want to engage in this? Where's it going to go? Yeah. But I do have some boundaries for what I will and will not engage in. Yeah. I am not a fan of the call out culture. It's been part of our country for years. In the 1700s and the 1800s, when we were creating this country, that's what the Federalist Papers were. It was call out culture. So it's not new. Right. It's just more prevalent than it has been because of social media, but I'm not going to engage in it. I don't like it. I think it's ugly. I think it's mean. I am willing to be wrong about everything. I'm willing to have that conversation. I'm not willing to be screamed at. I'm an adult. So I set boundaries for myself about 2 years ago. I met with some experts I met with a diversity expert, and we talked some about race, and we talked some about how to have hard conversations. And one of the things she recommended was set boundaries. Set boundaries for how you will engage in those conversations. And it's been great for me.
Yeah.
And for others, I hope. I think real learning comes from sitting down, with someone that you disagree with on every item and have the conversation.
Yeah.
That's what yeah.
I love
and so
that.
when I think the other thing I will say is as our world changes, right? And as the online world changes and kind of what you were referencing going on now, I set boundaries with our team. We said, this is, we will not engage in performative activism. I see it everywhere. It's inauthentic. We won't do it. So,
yeah.
Period. And we set boundaries. Put your own oxygen mask on first. Listen, learn, don't, and so we have a lot of boundaries.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you're leading your team in through those boundaries as well, right? I think that's a really big lesson for people here. I've got team as well, and it's like I'm coaching my team because there's a few members that are having a hard time and they're personally impacted by what's going on. There's some things going on that are closer to home for them, and so I'm coaching them, and I'm like, I'm here for you. Let's have a new perspective. Let's keep working through the emotional triggers. Let's whatever it is, and having that open door, especially with our team and those that know we have a similar intention, obviously, to move something forward. And I just appreciate you sharing that. I'm with you. I don't think everything has to be engaged with, right? And I think it's become like this, like it's almost like if you don't engage, that means something about you. And I'm like, hold on a minute. And then we just start to perpetuate judgment, and we perpetuate.
We do.
Yeah.
We
the low vibe, approach. And so thank you for being a leader. Thank you for being a brave master. And as my company's called, and just being willing to have this kind of authentic and deep conversation, and maybe showing a different perspective. And I believe boundaries are okay too. Sometimes, when we're, if you are, in fact, not you, but those listening, it's like if you're a people pleaser, or if you are coming from a reaction, then it's hard sometimes to put the boundary in place. But I think it goes back to what feels right, not what your head thinks you should do, right? And when you feel out of alignment with what's happening or what's being said, you can pause and not add to the flame, not put gasoline on the flame, but calm it down. So then there's just some embers happening, so that you can have some perspective and then respond, or not have the engagement. And I've done a lot of work myself in like engaging differently. It's almost like choosing a different response, and right or wrong, and I think that's the power of just self, leadership as well as personal ownership. And so thank you for being an example of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you as well. I will say some of that I've learned from my team. I remember last year, somebody said something really nasty online, and I called our social media person, and I was like, hey, what do I do? And she's like, do you need to respond? And I was like, oh, no.
That's an option.
I don't. I didn't realize that was, like, I didn't even think about that because I'm so triggered. And so I think as we talk about leading our teams, I think, having teams that can lead you as well, and say, whoa, like that are willing to say, okay, let's think about this. Is this the best path forward?
Yeah.
Or even ask the question, do you need to respond? I don't. In that moment, I grew wings and I was free from the having to respond to everything. And it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and what I heard is, and really what I believe is co-leading, right? Co-leading.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very good.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I love that, and being an example. So thank you to our teams. We love you.
Absolutely. Yes.
And the people around us that keep reminding us to put our oxygen masks on, right? So thank you. I could go on and on. You're a delight. Thank you for being here. And what's the best way for people to connect with you?
You can reach me at kendrickshope.com. I think that we're giving you a little freebie, 3 mistakes that are a freebie, 3 mistakes that are keeping your business stuck and broke.
Perfect.
Because nobody wants to be broke, right? We all we want to make money. So you can absolutely learn more about authentic selling through that as well. And thank you so much for having me here. And can I just say to everybody who's listening, I know, I know what it's like when no matter where you are in your journey, if you're just starting out or if you've been plugging along for a while, or maybe you've already created some level of financial success, just hear my extremely Southern redneck voice in your head saying the same thing I said to my daughter. You can do anything you want to. Just believe. It's
Awesome.
out there for you.
Yes. Well, and what's so, I just got chills because what typically I ask at the end, but I think you just said it, is if this was your, no, it's perfect. If this was your last interview, what would you say to the world? And
Yeah, there you go.
unless there's something else, that was really it. That was
That's it.
awesome.
That's it. Yeah,
Just believe.
that's it.
Yeah. And I will buy the t-shirt. Just believe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you to all our listeners. If you got value out of this, if you heard something that just woke you up a little bit more, please make sure to share that feedback with us. Let us know how it impacted you in a positive way, and just be, be good humans, be kind. That's what we want to spread, and leave us a review if that makes sense for you. So love you all, and let's go get our brave on. Until next.